My name is Carol Miller. I am 69 years old, and for 15 years I financially supported my son and his family without them ever knowing. Until my daughter-in-law screamed at me in front of the whole neighborhood, "You old freeloader, living off my money." That same afternoon, I sold the house they were living in and left them with, quite literally, nothing. But the story I am about to tell you is far more complex than you might imagine. Picture the scene. It was a Sunday morning, and I was watering the plants in my backyard when I heard shouting coming from the house next door. The house where my son Michael lived with his wife Jessica and my 2 grandchildren. Shouts carrying words I never thought I would hear from my own daughter-in-law's mouth. "I can't take your mother anymore," Jessica screamed, her voice carrying down the entire block. "That old freeloader who lives off our money like some kind of parasite. I am sick of her acting like she owns the place." I stood there, frozen, the garden hose still in my hand. Old freeloader. Parasite. Those words were coming from the woman who, for 15 years, had eaten at my table, used my utilities, and lived in a house that I paid for, month after month, without her ever finding out. But before I tell you what happened next, I have to explain how I ended up in such a humiliating situation. Because this story began a long time ago, when I still believed that helping in silence was the right thing to do, when I thought that being a good mother meant sacrificing without ever expecting recognition. Listen closely to this story, and at the end, tell me what you would have done in my place. And tell me also from what city you are listening, because this story could happen to any parent, anywhere in the world. It all began 20 years ago when Michael got his degree as a computer technician. I was so proud of my boy. I had worked as a mechanic my whole life to pay for his education. I would get up at 5 in the morning and go to bed at 11 at night, but seeing my son with his diploma in hand was worth every extra hour, every lost weekend. After graduation, Michael got a job at a systems company. He wasn't making much, but it was a start. He started dating Jessica, a girl he had met in college. She seemed like a good person at first. Polite, friendly to me, always greeting me with respect. "Carol," she would say, "it's so nice to see you. Michael tells me so much about you." She treated me well, including me in conversations when they came over to the house. I thought I had found a good daughter-in-law. When they decided to get married, Michael came to talk to me. "Mom," he said, "we want to have a nice wedding, but we don't have all the money. Could you help us out?" Of course, I helped them. I took from my savings to pay for the venue, the catering, even her wedding dress. It was my life savings, but it was for my son's happiness. "Mom, we'll pay you back as soon as we're on our feet," Michael promised. I told him not to worry, that it was my wedding gift. But deep down, I hoped they would at least appreciate the sacrifice I was making. After the wedding, they rented a small apartment. Michael was earning little, and Jessica worked part-time in an office. They were living on a tight budget, but I thought it was normal that all young married couples go through that stage. Until one day, Michael called me in a panic. "Mom, we're behind on the rent. The landlord is going to kick us out. Could you lend us the money?" It wasn't a loan, it was a gift, because that money never came back. But I couldn't bear to see my son out on the street. That was the first time. After that, there were many more. The car broke down. Jessica got sick and they needed money for the doctor. They were both out of work for a few months. They wanted to move to a bigger apartment. There was always an emergency. There was always a reason they needed my help, and I always gave it. He was my only son. What was I going to do? Let him fend for himself? I had worked my whole life to give him a better future. And if he needed help now, I was going to give it. When my first grandchild was born, things got worse. Jessica quit her job to take care of the baby. Michael alone couldn't support the whole family. That's when I made the decision that changed everything. A decision they never knew I had made. I went to the bank and took out a large loan, the kind that ties you down for life. With that money, I bought a house in the neighborhood where they lived. A 3-bedroom house with a backyard and a garage. Everything a young family could need, but I put it in my name. When I told them I had found a house for them, they were ecstatic. "Mom, how did you find such a beautiful house?" Michael asked me. "It belongs to a friend of mine who's moving out of state," I lied. "He's letting me have it for a very cheap rent, almost giving it away." They moved into that house believing they were paying a symbolic rent to a supposed friend of mine. But the reality was that I was paying the mortgage installments with my mechanic's pension and with extra jobs I did on the weekends. Side jobs they never knew I was doing. While Michael relaxed on Sundays watching football in his new living room, I was fixing cars in a makeshift workshop in my garage to be able to pay the mortgage on that house. While Jessica invited her friends over for coffee in her backyard, I was getting up at 6 in the morning to do odd jobs in plumbing or electrical work. But I did it happily. I watched my grandchildren run around that backyard. I saw my son come home from work to a house of his own. I saw my daughter-in-law tending to the garden plants as if she were the owner. And I felt satisfied. I thought all that sacrifice was worth it. What I didn't know was how Jessica had started talking about me when I wasn't around. I found out from my neighbor, Sharon, who would overhear their conversations from the other side of the fence. "Carol," Sharon told me one day, "I don't know if I should be telling you this, but your daughter-in-law speaks very poorly of you when you're not here." I was frozen. Poorly of me? The woman who was living for free in a house that I was paying for was speaking ill of me? "What does she say, Sharon?" "She says you're nosy, that you meddle too much in their lives, that Michael can't make a decision without consulting you. Yesterday, I heard her tell a friend on the phone that you're a gossipy old woman who won't let them live in peace." Nosy, gossipy. I, who was killing myself working to pay for the house they lived in. I, who couldn't sleep at night trying to figure out how I was going to make it to the end of the month with the mortgage payments and my own expenses. But I thought it was just women's talk, that maybe Jessica was stressed with the kids and was just blowing off steam, saying things she didn't really mean. I decided to ignore it and continue with my plan. My plan to give them a good life without them knowing the real cost. When my second grandchild was born, things got even more complicated. More expenses, more needs, more requests for help. "Mom, we need a new crib." "Mom, diapers are so expensive." "Mom, the private pediatrician is very expensive, but we don't like the one our insurance covers." I kept giving. I kept working extra on the weekends. I kept denying myself things so I could cover all the expenses they generated. My own house began to fall apart because all my money was going to support them. The paint was peeling, there were leaks in the roof, a refrigerator that barely worked. "Mom, why don't you fix up your house?" Michael would ask when he came to visit. "It looks really run down." And I would tell him I wasn't in a hurry, that I'd get to it later. I couldn't tell him I didn't have the money because I was giving it all to him. Jessica started to change with me. She was no longer the polite and friendly daughter-in-law from before. When I went to visit them, she would greet me with a sour face. "Oh, Carol, what a surprise," she'd say. But it wasn't a pleasant surprise. It was more like, "Here's this old pain in the neck again." If I arrived at lunchtime, she wouldn't invite me to stay. "Oh, Carol, we've already eaten. Maybe next time you could call before you come." I, who was paying for the house she lived in, I, who had even paid for the refrigerator from which she got her food, had to call before visiting them. On Sundays, when families traditionally get together, they always started to have other plans. "Mom, we're having lunch at Jessica's parents' house," always at Jessica's parents' house. The other grandparents, who hadn't contributed a single dollar to help them, were the favorites. "And why don't you come over to my place once in a while?" I asked one time. "Oh, Carol," Jessica said. "It's just that your house is a bit complicated. The kids get so dirty, and then it's a mess to clean their clothes. My house was complicated because all my time and money went into maintaining theirs. My house was deteriorating because I prioritized my family's well-being over my own." One day, I overheard Jessica talking on the phone with her mother. I was in the backyard fixing a leaky faucet, and they thought I had left. "No, Mom. Michael's old lady is unbearable. She thinks she owns our lives. Yesterday, she came over without calling and stayed all afternoon watching television as if it were her house. As if it were her house. It was my house. Literally, legally, it was my house. But she spoke as if I were an intruder. Besides," she continued, "she lives like she's dirt poor, but she's always criticizing how we spend our money. The other day, she saw me buying clothes for the kids and told me they were too expensive, as if she were the one paying. I was the one paying. I paid for the house. I paid for a large part of their expenses. I deprived myself of things so they could live well, But to her, I was a critical old woman who didn't understand anything. The last straw came 3 months ago. Jessica organized a party at her house for my older granddaughter's birthday. She invited all her family, her friends, the neighbors, a big party in the backyard that I paid for, with food that was bought with money I had given. When I arrived at the party, she greeted me with a forced smile. "Oh, Carol, so good of you to come. The kids were waiting for you." But she sat me at a table off to the side, away from the action, as if I were a second-class guest. During the party, I heard Jessica telling her friends about her house, about her plans for remodeling, about how they had gotten such a steal on the rent. She spoke as if it were all her and Michael's achievement, as if they had just been lucky to find a cheap place. "We're so fortunate," she told a friend. "We got this house for a song. The owner is an old friend of my mother-in-law's who practically gave it to us. A song, a gift. My daily sacrifice turned into a stroke of luck. But the worst came later. When most of the guests had left, I heard Jessica talking with her sister-in-law in the kitchen. I was gathering the dirty plates to help when I overheard them. "Honestly," Jessica said, "sometimes I'm embarrassed when my mother-in-law comes over. Look at how she dresses. Look at her hands all covered in grease. My friend's kids ask who that scruffy lady is." My hands were covered in grease because every weekend I worked on cars to be able to pay for the house where she threw parties. I was poorly dressed because I bought myself a new shirt every 2 years so I could cover all her expenses. "And besides," she went on, "she thinks she has the right to an opinion on everything. The other day she told me the kids watch too much television, as if she knows anything about raising modern children. She's from another era. She doesn't get it." That night, I left the party with a broken heart. Not because of what she had said about me, but because I realized I had dedicated my entire life to people who not only didn't value my sacrifice, but were ashamed of me. I came home to my rundown house, my half-empty refrigerator, my bed with its worn-out sheets, and I sat down to think. What was I doing? Why was I killing myself working for people who despised me? That night, I made a decision they never imagined I could make. A decision that would change everything forever. The next day I went to the bank and requested all the paperwork for the house. I wanted to see exactly how much I had paid over all these years, how much I had left to pay. The numbers shocked me. I had paid off almost 80% of the house, my house. Then I went to see an appraiser. I wanted to know how much the property was worth in the current market. The valuation surprised me. The house was worth much more than what I had originally paid. The area had become more valuable. It had grown. It had become trendy. With that information, I went to see a lawyer, a serious guy, a colleague from the workshop had recommended. I told him the whole situation, how I had bought the house without my family knowing, how I had been paying for it for years, how they thought it was a rental. The lawyer looked at me with a mix of surprise and pity. "Mrs. Miller," he said, "you are the legal owner of that house. You can do whatever you want with it. You can sell it. You can rent it to strangers. You can evict your family if you want to." "But, sir," I said, "they're my son and my grandchildren. I can't just throw them out." "Mrs. Miller," he replied, "sometimes family takes advantage of us precisely because they know we'll never take drastic measures. Sometimes you have to set boundaries." I left the lawyer's office with an idea circling in my head. An idea that at first seemed terrible, but that slowly began to take shape. What if I showed them whose house it really was? What if I stopped supporting them in secret? I spent 2 weeks mulling it over. 2 weeks observing them, listening to them, seeing how they continued to talk about me as if I were a burden, a nuisance, an old woman who didn't understand the modern world. Michael never defended me when Jessica made nasty comments about me. He would stay silent or even back her up. "Yeah, my mom's a bit old-fashioned," he'd say. "She doesn't understand how things are now." Old-fashioned. The woman who was paying for their house was old-fashioned. The woman who worked on weekends so they could live well was old-fashioned. I made the final decision that Sunday I told you about at the beginning, when I heard Jessica scream at Michael in the backyard, that old freeloader who lives off our money like some kind of parasite. Old freeloader. Parasite. Living off their money. In that moment, my patience ran out. In that moment, I realized I had been a fool for 15 years. I didn't leave my house. I didn't go to argue. I didn't go to explain anything. I simply picked up my phone and called the lawyer. "Mr. Peterson," I said, "I want to sell the house today. But, Mrs. Miller, are you sure? It's a very drastic decision." "I'm sure," I said. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The lawyer already had everything prepared because we had discussed it several times. There was a real estate agency that handled quick sales. There were buyers interested in that area. There was a whole machine ready to go. In 48 hours, I can have the sale closed, he told me. But you'll have to notify your family that they have to vacate. "I'll take care of that," I replied. That afternoon, while Jessica was still screaming from the other side of the fence about the old parasite, I signed all the sale papers. The house where they lived, the house they thought belonged to a friend of mine who charged them a pittance for rent, was being sold to the highest bidder. On Monday morning, a realtor arrived at their house. I went with him. Michael opened the door, looking surprised. "Mom, what's going on? Who is this man?" "I'm Mr. Davis with Summit Realty," the man introduced himself. "I'm here to officially notify you that this property has been sold. The current occupants have 72 hours to vacate." Michael turned pale. "There must be a mistake. We rent this house. We have a lease." "No, sir," the realtor said. "This house belonged to Mrs. Carol Miller, and she sold it yesterday. There is no registered rental agreement." Jessica appeared from inside. "What are you talking about? What is this?" The realtor handed her the papers. "Ma'am, you have 72 hours to vacate this property. The house was legally sold by its owner." "Its owner?" Jessica looked at me as if she were seeing me for the first time. "Carol, are you the owner of this house?" "Yes, Jessica, I have been the owner for 15 years. I bought it for you. I paid for it with my work, and all this time you believed it belonged to a friend of mine." Michael collapsed into a chair. "Mom, I don't understand anything. You bought this house? Why did you never tell us?" "Because I wanted to help you without you feeling obligated to me. Because I thought if you knew I was paying for it, you would feel uncomfortable." How wrong I was. Jessica was still reading the papers with a look of disbelief. "But Carol, you can't just sell the house on us like this. We live here. The kids go to school here. We can't just leave from one day to the next." "Jessica," I said, with a voice I didn't even know I had, "yesterday I heard you scream at your husband that I was an old freeloader living off your money, that I was a parasite. So I decided to show you whose money it really was." She fell silent. For the first time in years, Jessica was speechless. "Besides," I continued, "the new owner specifically requested that the house be vacant because she's moving in on Friday." "The new owner?" Michael asked. "Yes. I sold the house to Sharon, our neighbor. She heard everything Jessica said about me and offered to buy it for a very good price. Sharon, who had been a silent witness to all the mistreatment I had received, had pooled her savings to buy the house. "Carol," she had told me, "you don't deserve to be treated like this. I'll buy the house from you, and then we'll see what happens." The following days were chaos. Michael called me every 5 minutes. "Mom, we need to talk. This is insane. You can't do this." For the first time in years, Jessica came to my house to look for me. She was no longer the arrogant daughter-in-law from before. Now she came to beg. "Carol," she said with tears in her eyes, "I'm so sorry for what I said. I was stressed. I wasn't thinking. You know I respect you very much." Respect. The word I had been waiting to hear for years, and it only came when it was too late. "Jessica," I replied, "for 15 years I worked like a slave so you could live well. For 15 years I deprived myself of things so that you would want for nothing. And for 15 years you treated me like I was a burden. But, Carol, we didn't know. Of course you didn't know, because you never bothered to find out. You never wondered how I managed to live on so little money. You never wondered why my house was falling apart while yours was impeccable." Michael tried to mediate. "Mom, I understand you're angry, but the kids aren't to blame. They're your grandchildren. You can't leave them on the street." "I'm not leaving them on the street, Michael. I'm teaching them a lesson. A lesson you should have learned a long time ago." On Wednesday, while they were desperately packing their things and looking for a new place to live, I sat down and did the math. The math of everything I had spent on them over 15 years. Not just the house, but all the loans they had never paid back, all the gifts, all the extra expenses. The sum surprised even me. I had spent the equivalent of 2 houses on them. 2 houses I could have had for myself. 2 houses that could have been my financial security in old age. But I didn't regret having done it. I regretted having done it in secret. I regretted allowing them to despise me while I was supporting them. On Thursday night, Michael came to see me alone. He looked defeated, stripped of his usual arrogance. "Mom," he said, "we found an apartment to rent, but we need the money for the security deposit. Can you help us one last time?" I looked at him in silence for a long time. My son, my only son, the man for whom I had sacrificed my whole life, was coming to ask me for money again. After everything that had happened, after discovering the truth, his first reaction was to ask for more help. "Michael," I said, "for 15 years I helped you without you knowing. I gave you a house. I paid your bills. I worked extra on weekends so you could live comfortably. And you know what I got in return? Mom. I got contempt. I got mockery. I got a daughter-in-law who called me a parasite while living off my labor. And I got a son who never once stood up for me." He fell silent. For the first time in his life, Michael had no answer. "You're going to get the money for the security deposit yourself, by working, like normal people do, like you should have been doing from the beginning. But Mom, I do work. You work to get by, Michael. Now you're going to have to work to truly live, without your mother paying for your house behind the scenes." On Friday, they left. I watched from my window as they loaded their things into a moving truck they had to pay for themselves. Jessica was crying. My grandchildren were asking why they had to leave. Michael carried the boxes with a look of utter despair. Sharon invited me over for coffee in the backyard of the house that was now hers. "Carol," she said, "don't you feel bad seeing them like this?" "Sharon," I replied, "I feel bad that it took me so long to make this decision. With the money from the sale of the house, I was able to do something I hadn't done in decades. Think about myself. I fixed my house from top to bottom. I replaced all the appliances. I bought new clothes. I treated myself to things I hadn't enjoyed in years. I also did something more important. I made an investment that ensures I have an income for the rest of my life. I no longer have to work on weekends. I no longer have to pinch every penny. I no longer have to live like a poor woman to support others. But above all, I regained my dignity. That dignity I had slowly lost without realizing it, while I allowed them to treat me like a nuisance." 3 months after they moved out, Michael called me. "Mom," he said, "we're settled in the new apartment. Do you want to come see it?" I went, more out of curiosity than anything else. The apartment was small, dark, with little space for the kids. Michael had lost weight. He looked stressed. Jessica avoided my gaze and greeted me with a forced cordiality. "How are you doing financially?" I asked them. "It's tight," Michael replied. "The rent is expensive, but we're managing." Jessica went back to work part-time. Jessica working again. The woman who had gotten used to living like a queen without working now had to get up early every day. "The kids miss the old house," Michael told me. "They ask when we're going back." "You're not going back," I said. That chapter is over. During that visit, I noticed something that caught my attention. Michael and Jessica spoke to each other differently. It wasn't the relaxed marriage from before. There was tension, silent reproaches, resentment. "How are things between you two?" I asked Michael when Jessica went into the kitchen. "It's complicated," he confessed. "She blames me for losing the house. She says if I had had a better relationship with you, you wouldn't have made that decision." Interesting. Now it was Michael's fault for not having a good relationship with me. It wasn't her fault for treating me badly for years. It was his fault for not managing me better. "And what do you think?" I asked him. Michael sighed. "I think we were ungrateful. I think you gave us everything, and we didn't know how to appreciate it. I think we deserved what happened to us." It was the first time Michael admitted they had been wrong. The first time he acknowledged my sacrifice. But it had come too late, when it no longer mattered. 6 months later, Michael and Jessica separated. He told me over the phone with a tired voice, "It's over, Mom. Jessica is moving in with her parents and taking the kids. And what are you going to do? I don't know. Find something cheaper, maybe a studio apartment? With what I make, I can't afford to support the kids and pay for a decent apartment. A studio apartment. My son, who had lived for 15 years in a 3-bedroom house paid for by me, was now going to end up in a studio apartment. Michael, I said, all this time I supported you without you knowing. I paid for the house. I paid your bills. I worked weekends so you could live comfortably. And when I found out what you really thought of me, I made the right decision. I know, Mom. I realize now everything you did. You realize it now? When you have no other choice but to realize it? Mom, is there any chance that what, Michael, that you can help me again, just until I get back on my feet? I looked at him in silence. After losing the house, after his marriage fell apart, after being practically left on the street, his reaction was still the same, asking me for help. Michael, for 15 years I helped you in secret, and you despised me. Now that you know the truth, you come to me asking for help again? It's different now, Mom. Now I know what you did for us. No, son. It's not different. You're coming to ask for help because you have no other choice, not because you've learned to value me. If you won the lottery tomorrow, you'd go back to treating me like you did before. Roberto fell silent because he knew it was true. 1 year after selling the house, my life had completely changed. I was no longer the old woman working on weekends to secretly support an ungrateful family. I was a 70-year-old woman who, for the first time in decades, was living for herself. I joined a senior center where I played cards every afternoon. I met a man named Howard, a 75-year-old widower who had gone through something similar with his children. Carol, he would tell me, family has to earn respect, not demand it just because they're family. I also met Grace, a 65-year-old woman whose husband had died 5 years ago. She worked as a volunteer at a hospital and had a contagious energy. We started going for walks in the afternoons, then for coffee, then for dinner. Don't you miss your family? She asked me once. I miss the family I thought I had, I replied. But I don't miss the people who despised me while living off my work. Grace had 2 children who lived out of state and visited her often. When they met me, they welcomed me with genuine affection. Carol, her eldest son, told me, "My mom has been so much happier since she met you. Thank you for making her smile." How different it felt to be welcomed instead of tolerated. How different it was to be with people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give them. Grace and I started dating 8 months after we met. At 70 years old, I discovered you could fall in love again. I discovered you could be happy without carrying the weight of supporting ungrateful people. Meanwhile, Michael's life continued to spiral downwards. He lost his job because he was showing up late after nights of drinking, trying to drown his problems. He had to move into a cheap motel because he couldn't even afford the studio apartment. Sharon, who still kept in touch with me, told me about it. "Carol," she said, "your son is doing very badly. He's looking for any kind of work, but no one will give him a chance. He's desperate." "Sharon," I replied, "I was desperate for years, working like an animal to support them. Now it's his turn." Jessica, for her part, had moved back in with her parents. The same parents who for years had enjoyed having lunch in a house paid for by me while I ate alone in my rundown home. Now she had to put up with them, telling her all day how to raise her children. "Jessica's parents are driving her crazy," Sharon told me. "They criticize everything she does. They don't let her live in peace. She says she misses her house." Her house. The house I had paid for 15 years was still her house in her mind. 2 years after selling the house, I received a call I wasn't expecting. It was Jessica. "Carol," she said in a voice I didn't recognize, "can we talk?" "Talk about what, Jessica?" "About what happened, about what I did, about how badly I treated you." I agreed to see her, more out of curiosity than anything else. She came to my house on a Thursday afternoon. She had changed a lot, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes, with that look of someone who has been through difficult times. "Carol," she said as soon as she sat down, "I came to apologize. I came to tell you that you were right about everything." "What was I right about, Jessica? That we were ungrateful? That we didn't know how to value what you did for us?" She burst into tears, a sob that seemed to come from deep within. "Carol, I didn't know you were paying for the house. I thought Michael was earning all the money from his job. If you had known, what would you have done differently, Jessica? Would you have treated me better? Yes, she said without hesitation. I would have treated you as you deserved, like the woman who was supporting us. So, you would have respected me for the money I was providing, not for being your husband's mother. She fell silent. That was exactly it. Her respect would have been bought, not earned. Jessica, I said, for years you treated me like I was a nuisance, a stupid old woman who didn't understand the modern world. And now that you know I was paying for everything, you come to apologize. It's just that I don't understand how you could keep that a secret for so long. I kept it a secret because I wanted to help you without you feeling obligated. I thought it was generosity. Later, I realized it was stupidity. Jessica continued to cry. Carol, the kids ask about their grandmother, they want to come see you, they miss the afternoons they spent here. My grandchildren, the only innocents in this whole story. And what do you tell them? I tell them that Grandma is angry with Mom and Dad, but that she loves them very much. Does Michael know you came? No. Michael is. Michael is doing very badly, Carol. He's in a bad way, he drinks a lot, he can't find a steady job. Sometimes he doesn't see the kids for weeks. My son, the tech professional for whom I had worked double shifts, was now a drunk who couldn't hold down a job. And what do you expect me to do? I asked her. I don't know, maybe. Maybe if you talk to him. If you help him get back on his feet. Help him again? Give him another chance to treat me badly? No, Carol. Michael has changed. He's sorry. Jessica, Michael is desperate. How is that different? When someone is desperate, they say anything, they promise anything, but when things get better, they go back to being the same person they always were. She left that afternoon without getting what she came for. But before she left, she said something that stuck with me. Carol, you were like a mother to me too. I grew up without a father, and when I met Michael, I thought I had gained not only a husband but a mother as well. A mother. For all those years that I was killing myself working to support her, she saw me as a mother, but she treated me like a nuisance. Is that how she treated mothers? 3 months later, Michael showed up at my house. He was in a terrible state. Thin, with dirty clothes, smelling of alcohol, a beard of several days. My son, my only son, looked like a homeless person. Mom, he said, I've hit rock bottom. I've lost everything. I have nowhere to live, no job, nothing. I need help. What kind of help? Anything. A place to stay for a few days while I look for work. A little money for food. Whatever. I looked at him for a long time. He was my blood, my flesh, the baby I had held in my arms, the boy who used to help me in the workshop, the young man I had been so proud of when he graduated. Michael, I said, I will help you, but on certain conditions. His face lit up. Anything, Mom, anything. First condition, you check into a rehabilitation center to quit drinking. Second condition, when you get out, you get a job, any job, and you don't ask me for money for 6 months. Third condition, you treat me with the respect I deserve, not like a bank you can withdraw money from whenever you need it. I accept everything, Mom, everything you say. And a fourth condition, if you disrespect me one more time, if you go back to treating me the way you used to, it's over for good. There are no more second chances. Michael checked into a rehab center that I paid for. 3 months of intensive treatment. When he came out, he was changed. Thinner, but stronger. More serious with a different look in his eyes. He got a job at a mechanic's garage. It wasn't IT systems. It was manual labor, but he accepted it without complaint. He started visiting me every Sunday. Punctual, respectful, grateful. Mom, he said one of those afternoons, these past few months have helped me understand a lot of things. To understand what you did for us and how badly we treated you. And what exactly did you understand? That for years we were like parasites living off your work. That we lived well thanks to your sacrifice, and on top of that, we despised you. That we were the worst children anyone could have. It was the first time Michael had used the word parasite to refer to himself. The same word Jessica had used to refer to me. Michael, I said, What hurt me the most wasn't the lack of money I spent on you. What hurt me the most was the lack of respect. I would have worked myself to death for you, but I needed you to value me. Can you forgive me, Mom? I've already forgiven you, son. That's why I'm helping you again. But you have to understand that our relationship has changed. I'm no longer the mother who gives without asking questions. Now I'm the mother who gives when she sees it's deserved. A year later, Michael had managed to get his life back on track. He had a steady job. He had rented a small but decent apartment. He saw his kids every other week. He still came to my house every Sunday, but now the relationship was different. He was no longer the son who came to ask for things. He was the son who came to share. He would bring donuts for our coffee. He would tell me about his work. He would ask about my health, about my relationship with Grace. "Are you going to marry Grace?" he asked one Sunday. "We're thinking about it," I replied. "Does that bother you?" "No, Mom. On the contrary. I'm happy that you're happy. You deserve it after everything you've been through." After everything I had been through, Michael had learned to see things from my perspective, something he had never done in his first 40 years of life. Grace and I got married at the courthouse on a Tuesday morning, a simple ceremony with just her children as witnesses. Michael wanted to come, but I told him it was something intimate. "I understand, Mom," he said. "Maybe by the next family event, I'll have earned my place." Earning his place. What a concept. Michael had understood that family love is not unconditional, that respect must be earned day by day, that being a son doesn't give you the right to mistreat your parents. Daniela tried to reach out several more times, but I kept my distance. She had been the main architect of my humiliation for years. I could forgive her, but I couldn't forget. "The kids want to meet their new grandmother," Michael told me, referring to Grace. "If you want, we can arrange something." I agreed to let my grandchildren meet Grace. After all, they weren't to blame for their parents' mistakes. The first time they came over, they were shy with Grace, but she had a special way with children. In half an hour, they were playing and laughing, as if they had known her their whole lives. "Grandma," my older granddaughter said to me, "why didn't you live with us before?" It was a difficult question to answer without speaking ill of her parents. "Because sometimes a family needs space to grow," I told her. "And now that we've all grown, we can see each other again." During that visit, Grace said something to me that stuck. "Carol, your grandchildren are beautiful, but it makes me sad to see how many years they lost with their grandmother because of their parents' mistakes." She was right. My grandchildren had been collateral damage in a war they didn't start. But it was also true that I couldn't have continued to endure the mistreatment just to maintain that relationship. Today, 3 years after selling the house, my life is completely different. I am married to a woman who loves and respects me. I have a cordial but distant relationship with Michael, who learned to value me when it was too late. I keep in contact with my grandchildren, who come to the house once a month. And above all, I have regained something I had lost without even realizing it: my self-esteem. For years, I had gotten used to living like a second-class citizen in my own family. I had resigned myself to being the old woman who bothers, the heavy mother-in-law, the grandmother who is tolerated out of obligation. Now I am Carol Miller again. I am not Michael's mom or Jessica's mother-in-law. I am a 72-year-old woman who works in her garden, who plays cards with her friends, who goes out to dinner with her wife, who enjoys her grandchildren without feeling like a nuisance. Do I regret selling the house? No. It was the best decision of my life. Do I regret helping my family for so many years? No, not that either. I regret allowing them to disrespect me while I was doing it. If I had known from the beginning that my help would be seen as an obligation and not as a gift, I would have set limits from day one. I would have demanded respect. I would have demanded recognition. I would have demanded to be treated like a human being and not a walking wallet. The lesson I learned, and that I want to share with you who are listening, is this: helping family is fine, but never at the cost of your dignity. Never allow them to treat you poorly just because they are family. The family that mistreats you is not family. They are toxic people who happen to share your blood, and it is never, ever too late to change things. I was 69 years old when I made the most important decision of my life. Some told me I was crazy, that I was too old to start over. But here I am. 3 years later, happier than I have been in decades. I miss the family I used to have. I miss the family I thought I had. I miss the illusion of having a grateful son and a respectful daughter-in-law. But I don't miss the reality of having an entitled son and a daughter-in-law who despised me. Sometimes Michael asks me if things will ever go back to the way they were. No, I tell him. They'll be better or they'll be worse, but never like they were before. Because before, I was a doormat, and now I'm a woman who respects herself. And you, who have listened this far, who have accompanied me on this story that changed my life forever, I want you to ask yourself a question. Is there someone in your family who treats you badly, taking advantage of your love? Is there someone who receives your help as if it were an obligation and not a gift? If the answer is yes, remember my story. Remember that love shouldn't hurt, that family is not an excuse for mistreatment, and that it's never too late to put things right. Because in the end, what matters is not how much you give, but how you are treated when you give. And if they treat you badly, you have every right in the world to stop giving. I lost a toxic family and gained a dignified life, and I assure you, it was the best deal of my life. The other day, while Grace and I were having coffee in our backyard, she said something that made me think. Carol, do you think Michael has really changed? Or is he just being good because he needs you not to abandon him again? It's a question I ask myself often. Michael comes every Sunday. He brings donuts. He asks how I am. He's interested in my health. But sometimes I look at him and wonder if it's all genuine or if it's fear of me leaving him with nothing again. Grace, I said, I think Michael has learned something, but I also think that fear is a great teacher. If he respects me out of fear of losing me again, that's fine. At least he respects me. Last week, we had a conversation that marked me. Michael told me, Mom, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and think about everything we lost by being so blind. Not just the house, not just the financial comfort. We lost years of having a normal relationship with you. And whose fault was that, Michael? Ours. Completely ours. You gave us everything, and we gave you crumbs of fake affection. Crumbs of fake affection. What a harsh but precise phrase. For years, I lived on emotional crumbs while providing economic banquets. Michael also told me something that surprised me. Mom, when people in the neighborhood found out that you were the owner of the house and that you had sold it because of how we treated you, people started to treat me differently. I wasn't the mechanic's son anymore. I was the ungrateful son who kicked his mother out of her own house. Public opinion. I had never thought about that. My neighbors, who had been silent witnesses to how they treated me, now looked at them with different eyes. Mrs. Gable, from the corner store, told me the other day, Your mother was a saint. She worked like a dog so you could live well, and you treated her like dirt. I was so ashamed, Mom. Shame. Finally, he felt shame for how they had treated me. Not pity for his current situation, but shame for his past actions. A month ago, something happened that moved me. Michael came over one Sunday with an old box. Mom, he said, I found this among my things and thought you'd like to have it. It was a box full of photos from when he was a little boy. Photos of him helping me in the workshop, when we went fishing, when I took him to the stadium. Photos from a time when he admired me, when I was his hero. Look at this one, he said, showing me a photo where he, about 10 years old, was standing next to me with a screwdriver in his hand, imitating my pose. I wanted to be just like you when I grew up. And what happened? I asked. I let myself be carried away by other influences. I let Jessica convince me that you were old-fashioned, that your advice was useless in the modern world. I was an idiot. That afternoon, we stayed looking at photos until it got dark. For the first time in years, Michael stayed for dinner. Grace made meatloaf, just like I used to make for him when he was a boy. Remember, Mom, when you taught me how to drive in your old car? I remember, I said. I took you to an empty parking lot and let you practice for hours. We came back with the car full of dents, and you didn't get angry. You told me that dents can be fixed, but learning to drive was for life. Did you learn? Yes, Mom, but it took me way too long to learn other, more important things. That night, after Michael left, Grace said to me, Carol, your son has changed. You can see it in his eyes. He doesn't have that arrogance anymore. Grace was right. Michael had changed. Maybe not completely, maybe not forever, but he had changed. And I had learned something too. That forgiveness doesn't mean going back to being the same as before. It means giving the other person a chance to show they can be different. The relationship with my grandchildren has also improved a lot. They come over often now, and when they're here, there's no pressure. We don't have to pretend everything is perfect. They can ask me why I don't live with their dad. They can talk about what they feel. They can be normal kids with a normal grandmother. My older granddaughter, who is now 12, said to me the other day, "Grandma, Mom says you got angry with them because they didn't respect you. Is that true? What do you think?" I asked her. I think that if I worked really hard to give something nice to someone and that person treated me badly, I'd be angry too. Kids understand more than we think. They understand justice. They understand when something isn't right. They understand that grandparents have feelings too. Daniela tried to get closer several more times, but I kept my distance. Not out of resentment, but out of self-preservation. Daniela had been the engine of all the contempt I received for years. She had poisoned Michael against me. She had created the toxic environment that forced me to take drastic measures. "Carol," she told me the last time she came, "I know I'll never earn your forgiveness, but I want you to know that every day I regret being so awful to you." "Daniela," I replied, "I've already forgiven you. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, nor does it mean exposing myself to that mistreatment again. You can go on with your life peacefully. I'm going to go on with mine." She left crying, but I didn't feel pity. I felt peace. The peace of having set things right, of having defended my dignity, of having shown that neither age nor family ties are an excuse to accept mistreatment. Howard, my friend from the center, told me something very wise. "Carol, some people learn from their mistakes, and some people learn from the consequences. Your son learned from the consequences, which is more painful, but also more effective." He was right. Michael didn't change when he realized he was wrong. He changed when he lost everything. Sometimes it's necessary to hit rock bottom to understand the value of what you had. Today, as I compose this story in my mind to tell it to you, I look out the window and see Grace watering the plants in the garden. I see the fixed-up house, the new furniture, the full refrigerator. I see the peaceful life I managed to build after years of sacrificing for people who didn't value it. I'm not rich, but I'm not poor either. I don't have a large family, but I have a family that respects me. I don't live in a mansion, but I live in a home filled with true love. And above all, I have something I didn't have 3 years ago. I have peace of mind. That peace that comes from knowing you made the right decisions, even if they were difficult. That peace that comes from knowing you are no longer anyone's victim. My story isn't perfect. I lost years of relationship with my grandchildren. I lost the illusion of having the united family I always dreamed of. I lost the money that could have been my inheritance for Michael. But I gained more important things. I gained self-respect. I gained a partner who values me. I gained the tranquility of living without having to beg for affection. If I had to make the same decision again, I would make it without hesitation. I would sell the house again. I would leave that toxic situation again. I would start over again. Because I learned that it's never too late to say enough. It's never too late to defend your dignity. And it's never too late to be happy, even if you have to start from scratch. The last thought I want to share with you is this. For years, I thought that being a good mother meant putting up with anything to keep the family together. Then I understood that being a good mother also means teaching your children that there are consequences for mistreatment. Michael learned. Late, but he learned. My grandchildren learned that grandparents are not toys to be used when convenient. Daniela learned that actions have consequences, even if they arrive years later. And I learned the most important lesson of all, that self-love is not selfishness. It's emotional survival. Tell me what you would do in my place, and from what city you are listening to me. Because this story can happen to anyone, anywhere. And the important thing is to know that there is always a way out. There is always a chance to get your dignity back. Remember, it is never too late to start respecting yourself. And when you start respecting yourself, others have no choice but to respect you too, or disappear from your life. And believe me, either of those two options is better than living as the emotional punching bag of your own family.